Dr. Behnam Tabrizi, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the expert interviews. I am so excited. And by the way, I know this was our second chance. Life sometimes gets in the way of great plans. This is the second occasion. And I can't tell you, I'm just over the top excited about your book, Going on Offense. I mentioned that I've got my executive group reading this particular book and
Yes.
sharing ideas. And thank you for being here today. It's wonderful to catch up.
Well, thank you, Art. I've heard great things about you, and I'm excited to be here with you.
So let's start. And I'm a big fan of the hook in books, the opening sentence in the preface. You have one of the top two opening sentences I've ever encountered in there. The other one comes from my good friend, Dr. Nick Morgan. And the question you raise is, how do you transform a typical organization into one that is perpetually agile, innovative, and fast-paced, and crackles with heightened expectations and intensity? That's what we want to know. How do we do that? So let's use that as a
Well,
jumping in point, and we'll build from there.
how much time do we?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got about 30 minutes here, so we have to condense.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'll condense it, and people could refer to the book.
Sure.
But basically, the first thing is, you know how when people go to jail, they put a mugshot around them and put a
Yeah.
number and they take a picture.
Uh-huh.
First of all, we got
No,
to put
no
a
personal
mugshot
experience, by
around.
the way, but I can imagine.
Right. Yes, yes. Um, the question, the most important thing is to have a view of what the situation is right now
Hmm.
and be honest about it. Because in some way, I think about the allegory of cave, the Plato's
Hmm.
metaphor, which is people feel like they're slave in the cave and they don't see it. They only see their shadows and they see the reality. So what we want to just take away these shadows, somehow make sure that we're not studying the matrix, the metrics. If you've seen the movie Matrix,
Hmm.
we don't want to see the matrix inside the matrix. We want to maybe get our senior executives out. We want to bring maybe some customers, some individual contributors, have an honest discussion about what's going well, what's not going well, and then engage the large organization in terms of the challenges. Believe me, when you ask people about the challenges, when you ask the customers, they'll tell you. I remember one of the greatest transformation early in my career I was involved with. David House, who left Intel, he was number two to take the job. He left, ran um, Bay Networks, which is one of the most successful
Sure.
transformation in Silicon Valley. He basically did a very simple study. He asked the people what was wrong. He asked the customers what Bay Network could do better. He juxtaposed those. 70-80% were the same. And then he said, now we're going to change this. But to do this, you need to transform the culture. You need to change mindset. And what I've done is I was interested to see what the elite organizations do,
Right.
such as Microsoft, such as Apple, such as Starbucks.
Hmm.
And the idea wasn't to be just like them, but to realize that there are different ways to become perpetual innovators. And the leadership of the organization could decide, you know what, I want to be 20% more like Apple. I want to be 10% more like Starbucks. So you have a menu of options where the leadership conversation and dialogue could lead toward how do we become elite, and then you watch yourself in the journey of how you're getting there and make adjustments as needed.
So it's interesting. Your book is well researched, backed by a lot of statistics and data and interviews, thousands of interviews and surveys. The dilemma that I think I have and everyone has with these fabulous books is the ideas are there, but how do we bring them into our organizations? The middle, mid-America manufacturer, small to mid-size, the services firm, the smaller software company, how do they translate these ideas? Because they can't become Apple or Microsoft or I was going to say Google, but we're going to come to them. You kind of put them on the in the rear view mirror. So I'm interested in that, but that's a sidebar. So how do we
We
help?
actually early, yeah, about over I think it was 2009, 2010. I worked with a Midwest company that was in Muncie, Indiana,
Hmm.
and it was basically a software company that helped organizations be able to get more traction with their uh, customers and their accounts payable.
Okay.
So uh, I actually went there and I've written a case about this, the rapid transformation of this organization, and it's really, I'm always at awe with how much potential, how much gap there is between people's aspiration and their skill, and how much people really want to
Hmm.
get better. And once you create a forum by which you are open about the problems, and then you engage people, you get people committed from their heart into making a difference. You help people become the author of change. How much more performance you can actually have in the organization. You will have more fulfilled employees, you will also have more fulfilled customers. So this organization transformed from a enterprise app to
Uh-huh.
a SaaS app where they went to cloud, and they knew they're going to get hit in the margins, but they took the courage to do it before their organization went out of business. And it did really well. Their margins got better, their profits got better. So the idea here is, what I try to do is not to talk about one item and write a book about it. Is I have a system holistic approach to
Hmm.
what it takes to transform an organization to a perpetual innovator. And I've given a menu of options where people anywhere around the world, they don't have to be elite organizations, they could actually look at. There are some lots of practical examples, and they can apply it to their own environment. But the most important thing is for them to have this discussion about the gap between where they are and what their aspiration is, and be able to create a path, especially from a cultural point of view, to change the DNA, to change the mindset. I mean, Art, without changing the mindset, you will never get there. And I've been amazed. I've tried this with governmental organizations, Asian organizations, where they're very reluctant to let people go. And we've had similar experiences because people always, everybody, as Scott McNeely, CEO of Sun, used to say, everybody likes to wake up and win. And after a while, people get beaten in the head, in the head. We get caught into this matrix. We show up completely uninspired at work. And by the way, just about every Gallup poll study shows that people are either just sleepwalking at work. A large majority of people,
That is
60%.
that is a crime, in my opinion. It's a crime perpetuated by poor managers. But yeah, I love your emphasis on culture. So, unfortunately, I didn't have the benefit of your expertise a number of years ago when I led out of Wisconsin a very similar enterprise to SaaS transformation. Right when SaaS was becoming a thing, it was a smaller company, 400 people in the organization. And to this day, I credit the culture and the ability of the people to flip the switch and say, you know what, we're going to get beyond the legacy of our business and the hardships of the business, and we're going to find a way to win. And I'm going to name drop here. Because of that successful transformation, there are 400 families in La Crosse, Wisconsin, that now have access to an SAP office because they ended up buying the company. So yes, that cultural transformation. I do have to tell you, for the 2 years that we led that transformation, I didn't sleep. It was
You know, I just posted something on LinkedIn saying, moving towards what you love saves you.
yeah.
And I mean, you said something really important, which I've also noticed in this transformation with the Muncie, Indiana, is that the transformation didn't just take place in this organization. their families. They talk
Yes,
about,
yes, yes.
restaurants. They talked about these.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you have the burden of those families on your shoulder. And these
Completely.
families, many of them retired from these organizations, and they talk about it. So
Right.
it's so important to show up with your best version, with your most authentic version. And at the end of the day, Art, as you said, it's so fulfilling to do this.
Yeah, it was the experience of a lifetime. And if you interviewed the many people involved, they will all say the same thing. 20 years later, they will say the same thing.
Yes.
So I have a question. I'm really intrigued by this. Through your research, you uncovered 37 qualities, I guess, in leaders and in employees and in the culture that were really required to be innovative, and you seem to reduce that down to an eight. And then there were six kind of add-ons in there. Fascinated. I actually drew a parallel, if you're familiar with the Beyond Performance from a number of years ago, where they did a pretty exhaustive study and found, I don't know, hundreds of levers they could push and pull to generate organizational health. And went on to say that, hey, for every organization, the particular levers you have to push or pull, that was their metaphor, are a little bit different. So can you talk about those 37 qualities, the 8 key qualities, and the 6 follow-on without giving too much away, because the book does a great job of it?
Sure. Let me share with you what I call. Can you see this?
We can, yes, yeah. The
Okay.
innovation operating model. Cool.
Right. The innovation operating model basically, uh, as you said, we came up with 37 characteristics, but we wanted to kind of do the Pareto of what the
Hmm.
the most important ones are, and then we were able to squeeze in some of them into a bigger category. But this is what I call a flywheel effect. And going back to the conversation about the transformation, I've spent a lifetime in transformation, but
Hmm.
I wanted to find the secret sauce of the elite organization. And I feel like this study really addresses that. And I've had so much fun doing this study. And what I found about these elite organizations is at the core, and by the way, these are spokes of the wheel, you need all of it.
Okay.
And it's important to varying degree depending on organization.
Hmm.
At the center of it is what I call existential purpose. You need, I mean, these organizations, people are not just engaged, committed, but it's a calling for them. For them, it's a calling. They show up excited. They feel like they're
Right.
changing the world, and the leaders speak to that. They walk the talk, and it's not just some statement on the wall. You can see it in the fabric of everybody in the organization. The second part is what I call they love their customer. They're obsessed about reducing the cost so that they charge the customers less. They innovate for the customers. And that obsession in every part of the organization, including HR, including manufacturing, everywhere, customers is always the most important element of everything they do. And it's less about politics, toxic culture. Is about how do we take care of the customer. So there is a simplicity in what they do, and there is a huge customer importance of customer. Third one, the I think is also very critical is what I call Pygmalion, and they are committed to training their people, and they're committed to espouse and scale the values that the company was founded, the good ones,
Hmm.
and be able to spread it across the organization. And I talk a lot about this, so I'm not going to go through all of them,
Sure, sure.
but these first three is what I call generosity. So there is a generosity toward their commitment to themselves, to others, to the customer. And the other two archetypes is uh, what I call ferocity. There's an amazing ferocity in the organization.
Hmm.
And the third is they're courageous. They take bold action. If at the end of the day, if every organization does incremental changes, everybody does, that's the job of managers. They show up, they do incremental changes. You can have incremental changes going in every direction, and you're not focused, you're not laser focused. And these are some type of things that we talk about in the book.
So I'm curious, you reference Stephen Elop's famous quote from Nokia, which effectively is, and I think I'm paraphrasing, we did everything right and we still lost.
I'm
What's
so
your
glad you
assessment?
brought that.
What's your assessment of that? Because that's what I worry about. We could follow the script and still lose.
Well, well, you know, I made sure that if I'm going to spend 7 years of my life into some, by the way, I didn't think it's going to take 7 years. I thought this at 2, 3 years. But
Oops.
what I made sure is that we also look at companies that didn't do well because I didn't want to have a survivorship bias.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nokia is a great example. When a senior executive or a CEO says something like that, you realize that they are inside the matrix
Mm.
and they're just not seeing it. They're kind of like the what we call the allegory of cave in Plato's. They just see their shadows. They don't see the reality,
Mm.
and they see that's the world they see. So he says he did everything right. He did everything right within the context of what he knew.
Mm-hmm.
But if you expose yourself, if you study, if you worked in these elite organizations, you see a completely different repertoire and a way of doing things. Let me just share with you something really interesting, which I
Sure.
just thought about. I love soccer, and I happen to know the owner and general manager of one of the best soccer teams in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and watched one of their games. At the end of the game, we went to this place within the stadium. They had a place, like a small place where they got together with the coach and everything. The team just won their match 4-1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the coach sat down with others and they analyzed as if they lost.
Ooh.
And there I realized no wonder why in US we're just not there yet. You know, at the level of elite and the way the European, and that's why we send a lot of our soccer players in US to Europe, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where the best are. So you gotta study the best, you gotta understand how the best think. You would never hear a comment like this from Jeff Bezos, Elon, Satya Nadella, or Howard Schultz. He would tell you, look, we screwed up, and these
Right.
are the 4 reasons why we
Why
screwed
we
up.
did it.
And boy, they will tell you areas where they failed in a very unassuming way.
Yeah, I had the impression that Elop's comment was more of a statement in mourning directed to the employees to try to minimize how they might all be feeling at that point. But yeah, a fascinating perspective. And you raise an interesting issue. So in order to be successful at building this incredibly agile culture that sustains innovation, do we need that iconic, challenging, world-beating founder at the head of it? Because those great companies all have that in common.
Well, you know, the one that really fascinates me based on your question is Satya Nadella.
Okay.
Because if you had asked people around him or the pundits, they would say, there's no way he can turn Microsoft around.
Right.
Microsoft is doomed. In fact, Jeff Bezos used to look across Seattle and say,
Right.
don't turn into like this organization.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
While
that's why it's
Satya
always
was,
day one at Amazon, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So while basically Satya is finding his footing,
Mm-hmm.
this is how the world saw it. And I don't even think Jeff Bezos thought this guy could turn around.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not an iconic leader.
True point.
But then he went through all the key items, which I talk in detail about the book. He turned that place around. So these iconic leaders they were not born iconic leaders, but they had this fast pace to learning.
Right.
They questioned conventional wisdoms.
Mm.
They never take like, this is how we've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I love about these iconic leaders is that they're not focused on you know, solely on things like finance, on what is our bottom line? How do we do this? A lot of times, like Steve Jobs, they're focused on what matters, which is, you know, services we offer. Because at the end of the day, the role of organization is whatever your output is, whatever your cost of output is, has to be less than the revenue you make.
Mm-hmm.
And to increase, I mean, you got to be thinking about how you can improve your products, how you can improve your services. Are they efficient? Are they effective? And these people were truly, truly engaged in these organizations, and all of them kind of were elbow deep into the detail organization. They were not in some ivory tower giving
Right.
commands. They would get in, and depending on their expertise, they would work on different parts of the business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you would see these leaders. Elon Musk had this great quote saying that, you know, the best performance in the organization is where the generals show up, you know. And so you see Elon in the factory floor sleeping. You see Satya talking to individual contributors. These leaders, they were iconic because they cared, mm-hmm. and they were really involved.
So let's talk about some of the barriers to success with this process and the great things. I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore. Jeffrey Moore, I had the privilege of chatting with him, much like I'm chatting with you, a number of years ago when he had published his book, Escape Velocity, which I think is one of the best statements on what's horribly broken about organizations that struggle to change. It's the budgeting systems, it's the strategic planning or lack thereof, it's the politics, it's the silos, it's the inertia that they face in their organizations. And so they don't take the risks, they don't develop the culture, they don't work out of their silos. I see that, Behnam, a lot more often than I see your style of organization here. How do we get beyond that? How do we cure that?
Absolutely, 100%. 90% of organizations are as you and Jeffrey, who's a close friend, by the way. I direct a program at Stanford, and I invited him, and I just love his energy.
Oh, he's remarkable.
So basically, and this is why I wrote this book. And at some point, I'd like to talk about kind of like the theme of my life, mm-hmm. and the trilogy of transformation. But why I wrote this book is to show a playbook by which these 95% organizations, mm-hmm. could think about how do we turn around. So that we don't have the problem as the Nokia CEO, Elsop had, which is how do I did everything I could, right. Give menus of option to people, and then people could decide what are the things they want to do, what are the areas they want to change, how do we engage people. Lots of example, detailed example and narrative about different ways of doing things. And other things that I avoided talking about just one company.
Sure. Because
if you look at the structure of Apple versus the structure of Amazon, it's like night and day. Mm-hmm. And I always try to refrain from the idea of, if you can just be more like Apple, you will be better. I'd like to give examples. That's why I end the book on Starbucks,
right?
A retail company. People don't think of Starbucks as a perpetual innovator, as a transformative organization. So again, these 90% or 95%, as you mentioned, they can get better. They don't need to be overnight success, sure. But they could have a path to get better. Because if they don't, I can tell you right now, this is something I want to really, really emphasize. People say, oh, a lot of your elite organization that you study are technology companies, where any organization that spends capital on technology is a technology company. Mm-hmm. And with AI coming to a scene, so it's really amazing. AI kind of showed up in a huge way, although I studied it when I was in graduate school, but more in an algorithmic way. All of a sudden, with the open AI, I wrote an article in HBR on Microsoft about how Microsoft was able to get in front of it. But now as AI is disrupting the businesses, every organization needs to be a perpetual innovator in the AI field. So I really believe the organization, and many, by the way, many organizations have been asking me about the results and so forth. So I'm excited to be able to share my learnings with the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, and you had mentioned that this book kind of fills a gap from your other two works, and you have what you call the trilogy of innovation. Share a bit about that, and then I want to delve a little bit into your background and how you came to do this work. Aha,
Awesome.
we see your screen.
So basically, what the trilogy of transformation
Mm-hmm.
is basically the question that I'm really interested in, Art, is
Mm-hmm.
how do we future proof our organizations?
Mm.
And the earlier work that I did, which looked at how do we rapidly transform the
Right.
organization, the sequential model of taking several years to transform your organization doesn't work because the technology moves so fast and you
Mm-hmm.
need to rapidly transform your organization. So that rapid transformation is a book I wrote with Harvard's
Right.
Business School Press, and it got a lot of traction, and then as I was transforming organization in a rapid way, I realized the biggest challenge to organizational transformation is what goes on people's mindset,
Right.
leaders, everyone. It's really at the individual level, right? So I wrote this book called Inside Out Effect,
Mm-hmm.
Personal Transformation, which is a very detailed cookbook in terms of how do we as leaders personally transform and become our best version and to have a calling. So once I did these two, I thought, wow, I cracked the code and I'm basically done. And it wasn't like until I had a dinner with this then CEO of Ericsson, who is now chairman of Verizon, Hans Westberger, which brought his senior executive to Stanford, many of them every year, several times. And I said, why do you send your people to Stanford? He said, because I want them to learn about the secret sauce of Silicon Valley. And that's where I realized there is a third leg of this trilogy that's missing. And that is the secret sauce of elite organizations. And when I thought about it, I realized it's not just contained in Silicon Valley. We have
Sure.
Starbucks, we have Amazon, which Amazon 1.5 million people running an 8-cylinder. To me, it's an amazing organization. And then I wanted to see organizations that didn't do well. And by the way, I also talk about organization AMD, and other type of
Mm-hmm.
organizations and organizations that are outside of Silicon Valley. So there, the secret sauce of the culture of innovation is what you see in this, what I call the flywheel effect. That's in the inside of it. And the third area of the triangle is what I call ecosystem transformation. Because what I've noticed with this organization, they just didn't do rapidly transform their culture or their people. They also thought about very creative, out of the box things that they went on offense
Mm-hmm.
to rearrange their ecosystem to their benefit.
Absolutely fascinating. We're all the beneficiaries of that great dinner with the gentleman there. So, um, I think you gave me an answer here that I always like to ask authors. I'm a big fan of jobs to be done theory and why should people hire this book? And you use the phrase, I want to help people future-proof their businesses. Is that an apt answer to why should people buy this book? Why should they hire this book or your collection of books?
Well, I would say if if I would give you a yes, like 100%, about a year ago, now with AI, I would say
Okay.
400%. And the reason I say this is because I see people, organizations, CEOs, every CEO I talk to
Mhm.
they're both concerned about AI, but they also know this is the biggest transformation in our lifetime or
Sure.
perhaps in any lifetime. And there's also a lot of things we don't know. I sit as an advisor to several, smaller organizations. I'm in a committee with World Economic Forum where we're looking at governance and AI. And there's a lot we don't know. And the ideas of this book and the trilogy of transformation is how do we adopt a new innovation in a way where we can perpetually innovate in this area. Like so far, what are the things we can do in HR? What are the things we can do in manufacturing? What are the things we could do in our call center where we can improve productivity? One of the greatest things I heard from one of the participants in the executive program I was teaching at the Stanford Business School was that the CEO of this 40,000 organization put together with the help of experts a 2 hour or probably it was 4 hours video of very simple vocabulary and understanding of what AI was to make sure everybody is level set in terms of what the understanding is, and then talk to everyone and says, look, you're never going to lose your job because of AI, but I also expect a market improvement in your productivity. So learn about it, learn about this, discuss it, and find ways you can improve your productive in a rational way so you can also do it safely, if you will.
Sounds like a kinder, gentler version of Jack Welch's old destroyyourbusiness.com as the internet was coming to fruition, and he encouraged them. I love that story. Thank you. So I'm always interested in the individual, and I'm fascinated by moments in people's lives when they're set on a course that really becomes their sense of purpose. And if I'm correct, you describe a situation in the book, and I believe you were a young professional working for a large company, three initialed companies. One started with I, the other ended with M. And you ran into a situation. Share that situation and how that's propelled you and driven you in your career.
Well, I was just received my master's from University of Illinois in computer science. We studied AI algorithms. No computer at that time could. We never thought there would be a computer power so much like today, where we can actually see it in reality. It was a dream. I got this amazing job in IBM, and we were trying to improve manufacturing. So I was, I came up with an idea about how we can actually make a difference. It wasn't directly related to my work, but it was kind of periphery. So I was so excited as a young person when I talked to my boss, and then my boss took a deep breath, kind of leaned back and said, Behnam, you and IBM is just this big log that's moving in this really slow river. And you and I are just a couple of ants just trying to hang on. What the hell are you trying to do? And this was before, the elephants learned to dance and the transformation IBM. Sure. But just imagine, I didn't have a lot of confidence then, but I had a lot of enthusiasm. I kind of felt really, really small. I felt like I was shrinking as he was saying this. And the whole point is that when people tell me, how do I motivate your students? I just hired some of your best students. Tell me, how do you motivate them? I tell them that just make sure you don't demotivate them. You don't need to motivate them. And then think about ways you demotivate them. And then we think about 8 or 10 things they do or their organization does to really make people smaller. And that's why startups oftentimes do well. And that is because people feel big, they feel like they matter, and they have agency. And this is why I always say that I'm more of a geriatric than pediatric. So I work with larger organizations because I think there's more challenging. As a former engineer, computer science, I like very complex system problems. And so one of the chapters in the book is how do we get large organizations to act like a startup, which many of these elite
Right.
organizations do.
Again, it's fascinating. I love that story. I love your motivation. That was a management course in motivation, all in one anecdote. Thank goodness, though, you received that and had that crucible moment, so to speak, because you went on to, in your own way, change the world or help us change the world. So there is some great goodness that came out of that frustrating moment for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, all right. So, down to two questions. By the way, I could talk to you forever. I suspect
Me
you have
too.
other things to do, but just I love this. So one question you had mentioned in our pre-discussion a little bit about how you're really motivated to have some of the concepts in going on offense apply to individuals at different levels of the organization. Help us understand that.
And Art, I was basically mentioning that I like to bring freshness to every podcast I
Sure.
have. I
Sure.
was thinking, with Art, we've been trying to connect, and my apologies last time I
Oh,
couldn't
no
make it.
need.
But this thing is very critical, and often people miss it, and that is things like existential purpose, things like tempo, uh, being bold,
Mhm.
extreme collaboration. It actually fits with individual values, not just organizational, but
Sure.
individual values. So if the question is, how do I become a perpetual innovator, right? Applying these 8 characteristics or 3 archetypes, generous toward your commitment, ferocious toward what you do, but also realize that you're not always pushing on the gas pedal. You also have a steering wheel. Sometimes you need to slow down, which is what
Mhm.
tempo is. And then courage, the courage to do amazing things and so forth. So these are requirements to be a perpetual innovator as an individual, as a leader. By the way, everybody is a leader.
Sure.
I know individual contributors listen to your podcast. I
Mhm.
want them to apply this to their life and maybe even have them on a scale of 1 to 10 write down what they think they are in each of these, and then have the people they work with or the people love them or close friends kind of rate them, and then have a discussion about it. And perhaps just like organizations where I want to be 20% better in this, I want to be 10% better in this, they can pick and choose from this menu. How do I become a perpetual innovators? At the end of the day, uh, I believe that half of the people in the world are living with true poverty,
Mhm.
but the other half have the poverty of meaning in their lives.
Mm.
And we all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And by being a perpetual innovators, we can just bring our best foot forward. And I believe that oftentimes, and this is another critical point I want to mention to your listeners, is that we over index on hiring talent
Mhm.
and don't emphasize enough on unleashing the talent you already have. And unleashing the talent is not just the leadership responsibility, it's also an individual responsibility. That's why your question is such a critical question.
What an incredible perspective. If I had a sound effect, I'd cue the cheering. If I was there, I'd give you, I don't know what I would do, but thank you. That's wonderful. And that gives us an entirely separate but powerful and important frame to soak up the ideas in going on offense. I have a hypothesis. We don't know if it's true. That what you just articulated in the personal impact of this work might be bigger and might allow us to navigate these more so than the organizational effect. I wonder. I guess time will tell.
Wow. This is, again, this is an insight that it's going to basically make a difference on because I have this plan where every 90 days I pivot and I do different things. So you just make a huge contribution, and I want to acknowledge you. This is what I love about this type of dialogue,
Mhm.
is that it's such a bi-directional, And this is what I want organization to do, is in an authentic way. They bring their best, all their faculties, all their excitements, and being in the zone, if you will, you
Hmm.
can get so many great ideas by
Oh my
these
gosh.
interactions. And we
So,
yearn for these, right?
and we all have a different window on these situations. So my window in the last couple of years has been working with 500 to 600 managers of different levels, all the way from the C-suite down to frontline. What you articulated and how they can leverage the concepts is so critical for them. And I see that because of my immersion with them, but my ability to look beyond this scenario. So again, it's golden. I have one last question for you, and it's something I ask every author. What did you learn? What did you learn either about yourself or about your discipline from the research and the work of this book? What's kind of that capstone lesson or insight?
Such a great question for an ending. Um, Number one thing I learned is I'm not never going to retire. Retiring is overrated, because although from a time perspective and from resources, I mean, you name it, this was such a costly project for me, and
Mhm.
I'm never going to get the return on investment. I mean, I'm talking about, selling books, but in terms of fulfillment, it was just
The
amazing.
psychic
And to
rewards
have
have to be huge.
the privilege of being able to do this. And for now, I've decided I'm done. But people like us, we get triggered. Some new things come in, and I'm like, wow, let's just run toward this. But so retirement is overrated, and I cannot imagine, sitting around and either just traveling nonstop, or be in front of the TV all day long. Again, moving toward what you love saves you. The other thing I learned is that, I've learned that every decision I make now is, I always ask myself, because when you live, and Walter Isaacson also says this, when you live with these amazing souls, and by the way, it's not just leaders, it's also
Mhm.
people in the
Sure.
organization, the leaders inside the organization. And then you see organizations that fail, so much of them live inside of you, because when
Mhm.
you write, you internalize these things. So I always think about this question of, hey, am I doing this because of mimetic reason, because I'm just copying something? Because you're supposed to question conventional wisdom all the time. So I check my assumptions. I feel I want to be more courageous, so I do more courageous, bold things as a result of this. Um, this bimodal thing has changed me. I mean, you're a coach, and you spend a lot of time coaching organizations. And so your point about these characteristics is even more critical,
Mhm.
and more traction with individuals. It has truly transformed me. And not
Mhm.
just me. Let me share with you.
Sure.
There was a person named Cameron, I forget her name. She read the book 4 times, and she found errors that the experts in copy editors could not find.
Mhm.
So I thought she probably knows my book better than I do, although I wrote it. So I called her. I said, Cameron, what do you think about this? And she said, this is not my area, but I am actually applying a lot of these things to my life and my career.
Oh,
Thank you so much. So in some ways, it has made a difference in me. And for that, I couldn't be more grateful. And thank you so much for, number one, reading it. When people appreciate your labor of love, it's the biggest gift you can give someone. I will let my friend Jeffrey Moore also know that you spoke highly of him, and I'm glad that you had him in your broadcast. And by the way, I don't think he minds me telling you, he is. I don't see him retiring, and he is up there, if you will. And his faculties, he's so sharp, and so that inspires me, because he's doing so well. But thank you for reading it, and thank you for sharing it with the people that you come across. And I hope that we can continue these conversations.
Dr. Tabrizi, this was remarkable for me, for everyone out there. I'm so excited to know that there is no retirement in your future and we'll all be the beneficiary of your ideas. This was truly a privilege. Thank you, sir. And I can't wait till our next chance to share ideas.